Well, let's unpack this further. Naeem, Jeenah is from the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. Naeem, thanks for your time this afternoon. And if you were listening to that joint press conference yesterday at the White House, you would have heard an audible gasp in the room when Trump made that announcement. By the way, this was supposed to be talks on the second phase of a truce between Hamas and Israel.
Yes, I mean the gasp is understandable. Trump announced not a plan, just fantastic and somewhat deranged pronouncements. He's really talking nonsense. I mean, there's what he's calling for is international human rights crimes, violations of international law, violations of just basic ethics. And before this, he said that he wanted to resettle all the people of Gaza, more than 2 million of them, in Jordan and Egypt. Both countries, of course, refused such a suggestion. Now he's saying that he wants to create jobs and houses. Therefore, one doesn't know who, because he wants to move the people out. But basically, the idea that one state can go across the world and take over the territory of another is just ludicrous.
Do you think, Naeem, that this was a speech that was written by the president's speechwriters, that it was fact-checked, that it was checked for all of the issues, the holes in this so-called plan in terms of violation of international law and a whole range of other issues, before he actually announced it?
No, I mean, Trump's style is that he just shoots his mouth off. If this was actually a proper prepared speech, I would be even more worried and scared that people in the White House who would prepare something would say something like this. But he just shoots his mouth off, complete kind of ignorance. As you heard, when he was talking about the people of Gaza being moved back in as if they're not there anymore. It's just a confused statements that he doesn't really understand. But really, in his style, again, very much full of a kind of arrogant American kind of, rulers of the world kind of attitude. We can go wherever we want, and we'll take over and we'll own Gaza. I mean, there's no consideration about the fact that maybe it's actually owned by someone else, just as he wants to take over and own Greenland and the Panama Canal, etc.
Yeah, you mentioned this already, Naeem, but Trump saying he claims there is support from the highest leadership in the Middle East. He didn't mention any of those leaders by name. And he, quote, wants Egypt and Jordan to take Gazans. Both countries have rejected this, as you say, ludicrous idea, but to take the people of Gaza, as you would perhaps take cattle.
Yes, exactly. I mean, in this, he is echoing the kind of sentiment that has been expressed by Netanyahu and others in the Israeli government. They regard Palestinians in general, and particularly those in Gaza, as just not just cattle, but problematic cattle that need to be gotten rid of. As for his statement about the leadership in the Middle East, etc., Jordan and Egypt came out against this idea when he announced it more than a week ago. No one else is going to support the kind of rubbish that he's talking. The Saudis this morning, around 4 or 5 o'clock, released a statement saying that they're not willing to normalize relations even with Israel until there is a commitment and a process towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. My thought about why they came out with it at 5 o'clock in the morning is they wanted it to be read as a direct response to what Trump said last night. So Saudis are not going to accept it. I mean, no one in the Middle East is going to accept it, neither governments nor the people. And certainly not the Palestinians, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. My mother always said, people judge you by your friends. So is it a surprise that Netanyahu seems to like the idea? I think the quote from that press briefing was, we should hear him out, from Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, and we saw on his face, he smiled and looked very smug. The point is that Netanyahu wants to annex the West Bank with its 2.5 million Palestinian population. So the more ridiculous the proposals that come from Trump, the more possibility there is, as far as Netanyahu is concerned, that Trump will endorse his less ridiculous proposal. So he's quite happy about Trump saying all kinds of nonsensical things, because then it would be easier to convince him to support annexation of the West Bank, even though that too is against international law. But Trump will likely support that. And the response, of course, from the Palestinians will be increased resistance to what they've already been giving the Israelis.
So what is the latest on talks of a second phase of the truce then, Naeem?
That is kind of hanging in the balance, as we knew for a while, but it's getting more difficult for Netanyahu not to engage in it, and mainly because, apart from Trump, that the Israeli population over the past 2 weeks has seen that talks and negotiations actually with the Palestinians actually works. They've got back the captives that were held by Palestinians in Gaza as promised. And so the Israeli population wants the process to continue so that the rest of the captives can return. And that's putting much more pressure on Netanyahu now than it was 2 weeks ago at the beginning of the ceasefire. So he's kind of tried to delay it. It was supposed to start, I think, today on the 16th day. He tried to delay it, but I think that at the moment it looks like it is quite likely that it will take place and move ahead.
I wonder whether you're concerned about, Netanyahu's comments insofar as there was a question about the end of the war, and I think his answer was, I'm paraphrasing now, we will end the war by winning the war. Does that, say anything about the second phase of talks?
Well, the one thing it does say, of course, is that they haven't won the war. In fact, by many standards, they've lost the war. But this is the kind of rhetoric that this is the kind of thing he's been promising his coalition partners in his government, that in fact, that as soon as the first phase is over, he will resume the bombardment of Gaza. That now seems unlikely, and it seems more and more that the extreme far right wing of his government is little more isolated than it was a few weeks ago. So he might say this in order to placate them, and he doesn't want them to pull out of his government while he's not even in the country. But I think he's going to do some fancy footwork when he gets back to try and keep them on board while continuing with the talk. So saying that the option remains on the table to continue the bombardment is his way of trying to keep his government together.